Hello, this is Ms. Whitfield. Of course, you know that. And so we're studying our English heritage. Our English heritage comes back to the fact that we, the United States, we are an American democracy. People felt that democracy wouldn't last. People didn't understand what democracy was. We developed a democracy during this point in time. As a democracy, we elect people to represent us, and it goes back to England, to the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights that we studied when we were in world history class last year. All of this has influence upon us, along with colonies. Okay, the Spanish were developing colonies, and the Spanish were becoming wealthy, and the English became jealous of this. So the English decided that they wanted to create colonies. Sir Walter Raleigh asked Queen Elizabeth, could he establish a colony? And since Sir Walter Raleigh was her favorite, she said yes. So Sir Walter Raleigh gets men and women and younger people together, and they had to pay their way to come to the New World. So they did. When they came to the New World, they established a colony in what we know of today as Manteo. The colony builds a fort known as Fort Raleigh, named, of course, for Sir Walter Raleigh, and the colony was prospering. The Indians were showing them how to do things. They were getting along. And then the colony grew short of supplies. So some of the leaders of the colony went back to England for supplies. England was at war with the Spanish in the Spanish Armada, and the Queen said, no, I can't let you go. I can't afford to send ships. I can't afford to send supplies. So they had to stay. Once the war was over and the English defeated the Spanish Armada, and this was considered an upset from our study of world history, then the settlers were allowed to come back to Fort Raleigh in North Carolina. When they came back and returned back, they didn't find anybody here, just the word Croatan carved on the tree. And so they tried to look for the settlers, couldn't find them. So they had to return back to England. Therefore, the colony became known as the Lost Colony. The Lost Colony now, historians and archaeologists have determined, moved inland up the Albemarle Sound up until around Bertie, the Mary Hill, Coleraine area. This is the most recent archaeological studies. The second colony that was established was the Jamestown Colony, which is close to where we know of Williamsburg, Virginia today. They established a colony in the middle of the James River. Many of these men who came were gentlemen. They weren't used to having to work. They brought with them their indentured servants, men that were paid. Well, they weren't paid. They were servants. They were expected to serve these men for whatever they wanted. Well, they began to have problems. John Smith took over the colony, and so he said if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And so pretty soon everybody fell in line and began to work. Now what did they raise? They raised tobacco. And the Jamestown colony began to grow. They had to leave the middle of the James River and go inland to become what we know of today as Williamsburg during this point in time. Over time, they had rebellion. Some of the people rebelled, and they felt that they were not being treated fairly, especially the poor people, the indentured servants. These indentured servants were people who could not afford the passage from Europe to come over to the New World. And what did they want? They wanted their rights. They wanted freedom. And remember, these colonists that came over, they were told that they had the same rights as English citizens would have. Anyway, these indentured servants were supposed to work anywhere from 7 to 10 years. The person who had paid for them to come over and work had to feed them, they had to house them, and they had to clothe them for that period of time. Both of them had to agree upon that. Other groups began to want to come over to the New World. People like the Pilgrims. They were a group of separatists. They wanted to separate from the Church of England. This is something you've got to remember from your world history studies. So they came to the New World for what? Religious freedom. They felt they could get along without the king. They wanted to worship with their particular religion. I think most of us can understand wanting to worship how we want to worship. We don't want people to tell us what to believe, what not to believe. Anyway, the Pilgrims came over. They were supposed to land in Virginia. They didn't land in Virginia. So instead, they created what's known as the Mayflower Compact. It's the first government of a first act of self-government that any of the colonists developed. And it was known as the Mayflower Compact, in which they're going to say, we're going to rule ourselves, and we're going to have to decide who gets punished. We're going to follow all the rules of society. They were so happy to get off that Mayflower ship. Anyway, over time, you have the Puritans that come over, and they wanted to purify the Church of England of its Roman Catholic ways. You had other groups that came over. The New England section develops, in which they are shipbuilders. They're building ships. They're making their livelihood from the sea. The middle colonies come. They're established, and the middle colonies have their set of economics. And in the southern colonies, you have your set of colonies that develop there. And most of their made their living on agriculture. I hope this helps you to understand how we get started in the Americas.